Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pitch Side Podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates. Follow us on social media, the usernames are on screen, the links are in the description, and of course, listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. Welcome to the newest episode of the Pitch Side Podcast. So let's kick off the episode by talking about the African Cup of Nations quarter-final results that wrapped up over the weekend, of course. Before that, I apologize for not being able to post a recap of the day on Saturday and Sunday. I was too focused on the African Cup of Nations and on the podcast, on posting articles on other websites and other things that I'm trying to do at the moment. So I wasn't able to do that, but I will be able to do that starting back from this week, hopefully. Let's get into the quarterfinals of the African Cup of Nations that wrapped up on the weekend, as I mentioned, and we start from the start. We start on Saturday, as Gambia, of course, lost to Cameroon 2-0. I don't have a lot to say about this game. I mean, I'm not exactly surprised of this result. Cameroon, yes, they were not that convincing in the lead up to this game, and it felt like everything was just being set up for them to win the tournament in some way, in some fashion. They had a couple of strength points. I think their attack is a really strong point, not just the fact that it's the strongest in the tournament, but the fact is that the two attackers are basically lifting the team on their shoulders. Like Cameroon scored 11 goals, all of them scored by two players only, with Vincent Aboubakar being the top scorer with 6, and behind him the second top scorer is Karl Toko Ekambi with 5 goals. Cameroon struggled a bit in this game. I'm giving them that. They struggled a bit to score. Gambia were pretty resilient in the first half. Defensively, they didn't allow spaces for Cameroon players to get behind them like other teams did. The midfield was pretty solid. In the final third, Cameroon didn't do a lot in the first half, but in the second half, it was different. Once they scored the first goal, you knew that the game was over, really, because Gambia didn't show very much of a thing going forward for them. And that's it, and they just defeated Gambia 2-0. I don't have anything more to say about this. They go through to the semi-final predictably, expectedly, nothing surprising, really. The surprise, though, which was sad for me, was Tunisia Burkina Faso on Saturday night in Garoua. After the game against Nigeria, everybody thought, you know what, the Burkina Faso game is going to be easier, of course, but in comparison, and we're going to have so much to do going forward. The fact of the matter is, Tunisia played the reverse game against Burkina Faso. Basically played the Nigeria game, but in reverse. Everything that went good in that game against Nigeria went bad against Burkina Faso. We couldn't play our own style. We couldn't go forward like we wanted to, particularly in the first half, and against a side that plays too much directly, like direct long balls towards the attackers. I mean, they started without Bertrand Traoré, and they still managed loads of chances behind our defenders. Obviously, we had defenders missing. We had Montserrat missing, which was a pretty big blow, in my opinion, because he was the best defender, I would argue, in our back line, and he was a pretty solid glue, and he also, made a great duo with Bilal Aifa, so is definitely a big blow for us when he was absent. And in the end, as I mentioned, the game that we played against Burkina Faso was basically the reverse that we played against Nigeria, and we played really, really badly in that game because the midfield wasn't working as we did against Nigeria. The space between the lines was pretty big, and Burkina Faso played in it very, very well. Once they had the ball, they transitioned very, very quickly, and I talked about that in the preview. I said that Burkina Faso are a team that knows how to transition really, really fast and really, really smooth. And with a stadium like Garoua, which is a pretty decent stadium, pretty decent pitch, to be fair, that transition was pretty smooth. The fullbacks, the wingers, everybody who has the ball, they transition forward very, very quickly forward, and the midfield was pretty absent in this one. They haven't been doing very, very well. I thought maybe the midfield should have had more energy. Someone like Shalani, someone like Baramvan could have been better in the midfield with more energy and more drive in games like these where you need those kind of situations. Yes, the referee made a couple of decisions that could have gone our way and maybe could have changed the result, the penalty against Kazri or the penalty suspicion against Kazri in the end, as it turned out for the referee. I thought, yes, it was the follow-up. He took the ball out, but he nearly broke Kazri's knee. It could have been a ligament injury, it could have been an ACL tear in that action. Why it's not a penalty, I don't really know. The goal for Burkina Faso, there was a handball in the build-up, not just in the build-up, like before Dango Traore shoots, Dango Ouattara, shoots, he touches the ball with his hand, but somehow the referee doesn't see it and ignores it. But anyway, as I mentioned, I don't want to cry a lot about the refereeing issues, because in my opinion we didn't play well, we didn't deserve a lot from the game, particularly in the first half. In the second half, I mean, there was a detail I would like to talk about. The goal, the time of the goal that we conceded was pretty poor and pretty bad. Right before half-time, when you're conceding a goal like that, it creeps doubt into you, because, to be fair, we ended the first half on a high. Like, we were pressing Burkina Faso in their own half in the end of the first half. Like, at the stoppage time, we had corner after the other, and for some reason I thought, why not? Like, take the 0-0, go to the dressing room with a 0-0 result, and just organise yourself from there. And it would have been a different game, I would argue, because the decisions would have been different, the mindset would have been different, and the coach would have dealt with the game a little bit better, and maybe the same substitutions would have made more effect if we were 0-0, and you would force maybe Burkina Faso to make even more rash decisions and all of that, and you would have the whole game under control in a way. But we didn't. And we deserved to lose, I would say. This tournament was pretty poor for us. We played 5 games, we lost 3 of them. I think we proved that we need more style in our football. The coach has been sacked, or has been terminated. His contract has been terminated. His assistant, Jalal Qadri, is now the main coach. Hopefully we get a new one by the time the World Cup qualifiers are in. We need a really good coach that can take us to the next level. We have a pretty good squad, but I think we need a coach that can get the best out of it and can get the best style possible out of it anyway. On Sunday, of course, the quarterfinals continued, with Egypt versus Morocco clashing in a big game in Ahmadou Ahidjo in Yaoundé. Both teams, I think, were riding high. Morocco on an overall great tournament leading to this game. Egypt on a big performance against Ivory Coast, a very demanding and exhausting, I think, performance against Ivory Coast. Getting all the way to penalties, a very exhausting performance here against Morocco as well, which could affect them in the semi-finals. We're going to preview that in a bit. But they played a very tenacious game again against Morocco, who started really strong. Egypt, 2 minutes in, they make a mistake, a penalty from Morocco, and Boufal makes it 1-0 for Morocco. And you think Morocco should have taken control of the game, by the way. But they didn't. They regressed. They left the control to Egypt in a weird move. I didn't expect from Morocco, like seeing their 4 games in this tournament. I didn't think that they will give control to Egypt of the game. I didn't think that they will allow them the ball that much. But they did in the first half, and Egypt, managed to close down the flanks in particular really well, because they know that that Morocco would love to play the crossing game a lot. Especially they have great fullbacks, particularly Ashraf Hakimi, of course, on the right is a pretty big danger almost on everything. Corners, set pieces, crosses, running in behind. He was the one that drew the penalty, so you can tell how dangerous he is, of course. But they closed down really well from there. They didn't make loads of mistakes, although they drawn pretty big number of fouls, I would say, but still none of them affected the game in the end. Generally speaking, the first half was not that good for Morocco after the goal. Like they regressed, they allowed Egypt the game and the space. Egypt were trying to switch to play on Mohamed Salah on the right, then just move it to the left or move it into the middle. And they had a number of chances in the first half, but you seen Bono was there and the defense was there. In the second half, Morocco tried to go more offensive. They tried to be a little bit more, a little bit more inclusive, I would say, in their attack. They tried to move through the middle. They tried to move on the right, on the left. But it wasn't to be. They didn't create loads of chances. They created only a handful, a big one to be fair, for Roman Sayis, which the goal Abu Gabal for Egypt just parried away. He had a great game, by the way, although he went down injured later on. And this game, by the time it reached the extra time, and of course after Egypt's equalizer, thanks to Mo Salah, of course, on a set piece, which is again Egypt taking advantage of a set piece, which is really, really good for them, considering that they couldn't do much on open play as well. After that goal, after the game went to extra time, everybody thought, you know what, this game is going to penalties and going all the way. But they didn't know, little did they know, that Trezeguet, the substitute, would score the second goal for Egypt and would take them to the semi-final. And after that, Egypt all had to do was manage the game, and they did manage the game pretty well, although they had another substitution to injury as Hegazi went down injured and had to substitute him, which means now that Egypt are pretty depleted when it comes to their defense. They basically play with a left back as a second centre half. Their right back was injured. Their replacement right back was injured. Their left back was injured and then returned. It's a pretty big deal for Egypt leading to the game against Cameroon in the semi-finals. For Morocco, they go out without a shame. Really, they go out to a side that is a very, very strong side, a very tenacious side. They missed the finishing part of the game, which I said in the game against Malawi. They missed a lot of chances which could affect them in the quarterfinal, and it did. Egypt played the same game against Morocco. They did play against Ivory Coast, but they were more effective, I would say, this time. Not allowing themselves to go into penalty shootouts. They avoided that fate, and they go to face Cameroon in a game that will be very, very hard for them, I would say. And we finish off, of course, by Senegal versus Equatorial Guinea, and this is just like the Gambia-Cameroon game. Not a lot to say about it, although Equatorial Guinea were not bad. They played to their strength. They scored an equalizer, which, you should have given the game a little bit of a flair. But I think Senegal, as I said in the preview, they have another gear to kick on, and they did turn that other gear on, and they scored 3 goals past Equatorial Guinea. In the whole tournament, they scored 3. In one game, they scored 3. This is how Senegal work. When they turn it on, they turn it on. Sadio Mane was at his best performance here. He was available, of course, after some injury worries after the game against Cape Verde. They score 3 goals, they dominate the game, they control it, they show why they are one of the favourites to win this tournament. It's not a surprise, really. Equatorial Guinea didn't, they weren't playing badly. They had a really, really good game, I would say. They had portions where they could have scored. After the 1-1, they had a bit of a momentum, but the second goal, I think, was pretty quick to deny them that by Chico Kouyaté. And then the third goal by a returning Ismaila Sarr, who wasn't available in the first 4 games, and who's available now. He comes in from the bench, and he scores for Senegal to make it 3-1. It's a big, big result for Senegal, and of course gets them to the semi-final to face Burkina Faso. That's going to be on Wednesday. Speaking of those semi-finals, of course, as we mentioned, they're going to take place on Wednesday and on Thursday. On Wednesday will be Senegal versus Burkina Faso, and on Thursday it will be Cameroon versus Egypt. Let's start with the game on Wednesday, of course, Burkina Faso versus Senegal. We talked about it just before this. Senegal not that convincing, I think, leading into the quarterfinal game. They haven't been impressive. Yes, they are always favourites, and by getting to the semi-finals, they prove it. But I think they haven't been this convincing. They haven't been, kicking into the second gear like we saw against Equatorial Guinea. They haven't been that good under Aliou Cisse. It always felt like something was off about them. But in the game against Equatorial Guinea, I think they've shown that they have enough in them to overpower any side in this tournament. And in my opinion, if they don't win the African Cup of Nations this year, I think it will be a long while before they get another great generation like this one and win the tournament. You look at the players they have a world-class player in almost every department. They have a great world-class goalkeeper, the best in the world. They have a world-class defender in Kalidou Koulibaly, a world-class midfielder in Idrissa Gueye, at least one world-class midfielder, because I'm not counting the likes of Kouyaté and Nampalys Mendy, who are really, really good as well, and play in the Premier League. And then you have, of course, Sadio Mane, who's a world-class player and one of the best wingers in the world, without a doubt. So you take all this into consideration. Senegal has to be odds-on favourites, in my opinion, to win this. I think if we're gonna rank them, I think behind Cameroon, because they are the hosts and they have the advantage, probably on and off the field. If you understand what I'm saying, I mean, Senegal probably would be second favourites to win the tournament, and they would have a lot of chance behind Cameroon to go and get the gold. Against Burkina Faso side that, as I mentioned about the game against Tunisia, they're really transitioning pretty quick. If they can find spaces behind your defense, they will hurt you. And I mean, I doubt that will happen against Senegal, because I would say they have a better midfield than us. They have a better organization against us. I doubt that they will allow Burkina Faso loads of spaces like they did. If Burkina Faso get Bertrand Traoré back in this game, maybe it will be different. I mean, I'm not going to say it will surprise me if Burkina Faso beats Senegal. Nothing will. I think in this tournament, I saw a lot of sort of surprises and upsets so far. I'm not going to be very shocked if that happens. But I think it has a less possibility to happen than against Tunisia. Because, again, as I mentioned, the midfield of Senegal is better than our midfield, and they have better organization. Physically, they're more prepared. And they didn't play an exhausting game, Senegal. Like, they didn't play a demanding game like we did against Nigeria, for example. Burkina Faso played extra time against Gabon, they're under 16. Maybe physically they will be also spent, do you think, after the game against Tunisia, because they played a high tempo in the first half? Who knows what could happen in that game anyway. To the game against the second game, of course, the game against Thursday, which is Cameroon and Egypt, which is going to be played in the Olimbi Stadium again. So the investigations apparently led to nothing after 8 people died in that stadium. I need to remind people of that because it's a bad situation anyway. Cameroon versus Egypt, a game that's going to be tough for Egypt. Like, it's going to be tough as it is, even with a full squad. So let alone without the first 2 goalkeepers potentially going to be out. Who knows who's going to be in the goalkeeping position. I think the third goalkeeper, Mohamed Sobhi, would be the one in the net, which is going to be a terrifying experience against 2 strikers like Abubakar and Toko Ekambi. You have players in the midfield missing, players in the defense missing. The good thing is, I mean, hopefully they don't miss players due to COVID, and we know the whole issues about the COVID testing in this tournament have been very confusing to death, and a lot of teams were damaged of this, Tunisia being one of them, of course, Comoros being one of them, and I mean, against Cameroon in particular, you really need to worry about this. I mean, Egypt need to be very careful in that situation. Of course, the testing is going to be taking place on Tuesday, according to the laws, 48 hours before the games. So I need to be careful on that. On the pitch, I think Egypt, if they close down really well and they play the same game, although physically you would have to ask yourself, can they play it for a 3rd time in a row against a side like Cameroon? Like, talk about the brackets, by the way. Senegal's way to the semi-final has been easy since the group stages. Like, it's been, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Guinea, and they play Cape Verde, and they play Equatorial Guinea in the quarters. You compare that to Egypt, who played Nigeria in the groups, who played Ivory Coast in a demanding game going all the way to penalties, who played Morocco, went to extra time with them, and physically it was spending. It was very expensive physically for Egypt to play those 3 games. And the other games in the group stage against Sudan and Guinea-Bissau were not easy at all even. So you have to ask yourself if they can do it for a 3rd time. I'm worried they can't. I'm just worried they can't. I'm just worried that Cameroon are too fresh for them. Cameroon, they've been doing this in the last couple of games. They run the show, they dominate, they win the game by the 60th minute, and then they just rest players. Egypt, on the other hand, they play 2 demanding physical games against Ivory Coast and Morocco, and they can't rest their big players. Cameroon can, because they had easier games in the group stages, easier game in the knockout stages so far, so they can rest their players. Egypt couldn't. So I'm really worried that physically Egypt would be spent by the 60th minute of that game against Cameroon. If they're physically prepared, which wouldn't shock me, they would have a big advantage, but I just doubt that this would be the end of their dreams to win the tournament. I think they will still play another game anyway, if they lose, of course, the 3rd place, but I think they would want to go to the final. However, the physical and the fitness part of it is going to be a very big effect in this one against a side like Cameroon that, as I mentioned, are so fresh. In my opinion, my predictions for the final is going to be pretty straightforward. Senegal, because they're much stronger than Burkina Faso, and Cameroon, because, as I mentioned, the fitness part is going to be a big factor in this. Although deep in my heart, I really want Cameroon to go out, just because I feel like they became the villain of the story, and nobody's really going to support them anyway. Moving on from the African Cup of Nations and moving on to the on-field action anyway, and let's talk about some transfer talk, of course, some transfer window activities. It has been I would say it's been a pretty active January window in comparison to other January windows. Usually there's no big signings in January made. Like, usually the norm is that there's not a lot of big signings made in January, but I think this one is pretty rich. This one is pretty active January window. And obviously, I think on top of those transfers, we have to talk about Dusan Vlahovic moving to Juventus from Fiorentina. The biggest outside transfer in this January window is Vlahovic moving to Fiorentina from Juve for 75 million euros. We mentioned before that Juventus were trying to offload some players and they were buying Vlahovic as an option, of course, second option. We thought that Morata was going to be the one leaving Juventus, but it wasn't. It wasn't Morata. Vlahovic came, of course, for 75 million euros, and as I mentioned, a big deal for Juve, someone who's really, really good. It continues the trade between Fiorentina and Juventus, and some people I thought online didn't believe that Fiorentina would sell Juventus another player, but they did. Just after Chiesa, they sold them Vlahovic. They sold them Quadrado before, they sold them Bonucci before, they sold them Benedeschi before, so there is a big relation, I think, between Fiorentina and Juve. So this move opened the door for the likes of Kulusevski and Bentancur to move both to Spurs on loan, of course. Kulusevski on an 18-month loan, Bentancur, I think, on a full permanent deal for 20 million euros plus add-ons. That as well is going to be allowing Lo Celso and Tanguy Ndombele maybe to move and offload some players to Olympique Lyonnais. Apparently the talks are still ongoing, as Antonio Conte, of course, is trying to strengthen his side, he's trying to improve his side, although I think maybe Bentancur is not going to be that available and that really fit for as far as the Premier League is concerned. Juventus, of course, are also making a deal for Denis Zakaria from Borussia Mönchengladbach for 5 million euros. That's pretty cheap, and obviously, considering that Denis Zakaria's contract expires on June 2022, you can understand why Juventus found it easy to buy Denis Zakaria with that fee, considering that just bought Dusan Vlahovic for 75 million euros. So they can make some profit from selling Bentancur and Kulusevski, and it's a pretty active transfer window as far as Juventus in particular are concerned, who want to rebuild the side, who want to build a great Juventus side once again. Tottenham on the other side for Conte, trying to improve their situation, trying to get into that top four. They're still within the race, rightfully so, and they still want to make the top four. And they have all the rights to do. And he went after his former club, Conte, raiding his former club of players. Although I don't think Bentancur is the best of quality, but anyway, we'll see how he's gonna maybe get the best out of him in that Juventus system or that Spurs system. Who knows? Still in the Premier League, we move on from Spurs. We move on to Liverpool, who acquired Luis Diaz for 40 million euros, and it's not a innocent segue, by the way, because Spurs were on the verge of signing Luis Diaz. Everything looked like Luis Diaz is gonna go to Spurs, but Liverpool just snatched him from the underneath Spurs. Apparently Tottenham didn't want to pay the fee that the guy wanted and the agents of the player wanted. Liverpool were ready. They scooped in 40 million euros. They take the guy until 2027, his contract with Liverpool, and it's a big coup. I saw the player play for Porto. He's a great winger. He's an unbelievable talent, I would say, as far as Liverpool are concerned. They need second options, I think. He can play right wing, he can play left wing, so he can be a replacement for both Salah and Mane. Maybe not on the same level, but still a good replacement is a good replacement. And I think the fact that Liverpool were very adamant on getting him in the end and on scooping him proves how big of a player that guy could be, and how big of a guy this, and how big of a coup this could be for Liverpool, and maybe a coup that would improve the situations this season and try and make them get the best result possible. Not going to say win the Premier League, because I think that's still a bit far-fetched, but in my opinion, it will really help them continue the season on a strong momentum. I mean, just a thing about Spurs, it feels like they're unlucky when it comes to transfers. I mean, they lost the race in Vlahovic, and they got, in my opinion, two of the utility players, I would say, for Juve. Lo Celso and Ndombele could be offloaded, and then you have not being able to sign Luis Diaz, which I thought they need some options as wingers, because Son is out. So when Son is injured, you're definitely worried about if Bergwijn and Moura are going to be the only wingers available for you when you are playing the rest of the games in the season, which are all critical, I would say, for Spurs, since they won the top 4 spot, as I mentioned, in the Premier League. Still in the Premier League, we're going to continue, and from Liverpool we go to Manchester and Manchester United. I mean, the blue side of Manchester didn't do a lot of deals, didn't do any at all. They only bought Julian Alvarez from River Plate in Argentina. That's the only big deal they made. As far as Man United are concerned, actually there's players leaving that club, not going in. Martial, as we mentioned before, left to Sevilla on loan, and Donny van de Beek officially joined Everton, of course, from Manchester United on loan. The deal is set to be completed in the next few hours. The medicals are going to be done, and the deal is going to be completed. I'm not going to say, I mean, it's a surprising deal, let's face it. As I mentioned, Donny van de Beek, one of the players that was nominated for the Ballon d'Or in 2019. 3 years later, you find yourself in Everton, who are not in the best of situations at the moment. Like, if Everton were a mid-table team, if they were 7th, if they were 8th, we would probably tolerate it or not be surprised by it. But I think the fact that Everton are not that far from relegation, and they're trying their best really to get some players to save their season, is not that good. I think it's not that good of a look. Van de Beek will get playtime, I'm sure of that, because if he doesn't get playtime at this Everton, it's impossible for him to get playtime anywhere. And we should see how this loan works. I mean, it worked before for Jesse Lingard. Maybe the loan would work for Martial at Sevilla as well. We'll see how the loan works for Donny van de Beek. As I mentioned, him and Martial. By the way, just a small situation on Man United. Obviously, the Greenwood incident, I'm not going to say incident, the Greenwood crime, I would say, because there is evidence of that. I mean, I don't know why there is so much controversy about it in the media. Like, it's straightforward assault, it's a crime from Greenwood. Why the media is trying to make it sound like something controversial, something alleged? Like, there is proof, there is evidence. His girlfriend showed evidence, showed videos and stories and pictures of her bruised and all of that. I don't know why this is bad, but anyway, that's probably a topic for another video, maybe. Let's continue on with the transfer talk, and we're still in the Premier League. From Manchester, we move to Newcastle. We move to Newcastle, who've been very active. They got the latest in their signings, Bruno Guimaraes from Olympique Lyonnais. Another signing that was supposed to go into Arsenal, or Spurs supposed to be going in London. Newcastle came in and scooped him for 25 million euros. Also, they scooped Dan Burn from Brighton. I think a good signing as far as defence is concerned. He's one of the best defenders, I think, in the Premier League, in my opinion. One of the most underrated, at the very least. He's very agile, I think, for his size, and he definitely a very solid defender in the back as well. So Newcastle seem to be trying to do their best, obviously, to try and save their season from being relegated. I think it's a hard mission, but they will try their best, obviously, to do so. Elsewhere in Europe, I think Chelsea are still, negotiating with Rudiger. Will he move or not? They're trying to bring Sula from Bayern, who's also maybe on the move. He intended to move. There's a lot of situations as well as Bayern, as I mentioned, with that regard. Lewandowski may be leaving in the summer if his contract isn't extended, and if the board is looking for a real replacement, mainly in Erling Haaland. The whole situation with Mbappe is still continuing. Ousmane Dembele, we don't know. This episode is recorded, I think, on deadline day. and probably by the time it's uploaded and it's posted, probably Ousmane Dembele is going to end up in a team, maybe Manchester United, according to all reports. The situation going on with Haaland, a lot of sources saying that he's going to be signing with Real Madrid, and he gave him his agreement, and there's a verbal agreement, and there's a contract, or there's a sort of terms reached between the two sides on a contract. Then you have, of course, as I mentioned, the Dembele situation, the Mbappe situation. There's loads of sagas going on in the transfer window at the moment, but I think those ones probably will be finished off in the summer, more than in this January transfer window. So as overall, I think it was a pretty busy transfer window. There's been some big coups, as you mentioned, Vlahovic to Juve, Diaz to Liverpool is a pretty big coup, but overall it was just loans and players, utility players moving from one club to the other. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from all the content on the channel. Follow us on social media. The usernames in the description, in the screen, and the links in the description. And of course, listen on all the podcast listening platforms. I was your host, HD of the PSP, and until next time, goodbye.
Behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.